Well, hello, students. For this particular week, we are going to be talking about the learning part of actually what we refer to as metacognition. If you haven't heard of that term before, metacognition really is about learning how to learn. In companies, a lot of people, employees get stuff thrown at them all the time. And that okay, like memorize this manual, or we're going to give you training on how to go through a certain process, and we're expecting you to know everything there is to know about that. Even when you have supervisory training, or even training for employees to learn maybe on a new accounting system or a new computer system. Whatever the situation is, one of the most difficult things for employees to do, whether they be at the top level of the organization or the bottom level, is not to be distracted and to focus on certain protocols which are essential and vital to their job. Now, there are a lot of companies out there that we refer to as learning organizations. And these are companies that allow employees to have a considerable amount of input into how a department is run. Um, they allow them to be innovative and creative. One of the companies that's great about that is Google. So, what I want to do is perhaps throw a YouTube video about Google and how they go about labeling themselves as a learning organization. But moving forward for what we're going to do this particular week, and what I want you to read up on is obviously chapter 3 in your book about learning. So last week we learned about individual characteristics. This week going forward, we're learning about how we apply those individual characteristics of personality, personal traits, understanding where we are in the Big Five, and we had an exercise on that. Understanding different types of supervisors, i.e., supervisors that are more theory X or theory Y type of supervisors, uh, people that are narcissistic in nature, and how that helps you be a better or a poorer leader. All of these things we're putting together and understanding a little bit more about us from a cognitive standpoint. So, the objectives of this particular chapter really focus around recognizing not only the behavioral part, which we associated with culture, and we talked about that on Monday, but the cognitive and the social approaches to learning. One on one, people learn one way, and in a group, people learn another way. Just like they perform their work function individually, and now that work function is thrown into a group environment. So, how do we go about understanding that? And we're going to talk a little bit about experiential learning and the 4 different types of learning styles. And something that has been very popular lately is experiential learning. And that ties into action learning. Learning as we go along and applying like a mind map to how we're going to do something. Because, the way a mind is set up, people learn in concepts, they don't learn in sentences. For example, if you had to go to the bathroom, just imagine what it would be like if you had to really put everything in a linear sequence. I have to get up from my seat, I have to, period. Then I have to go to the door, period. Next, find my way down the hall, period. Then you get the point. Well, God, by the time you actually got to do what you needed to do, you might have run out of time. But the point I'm trying to say is most people learn emotionally first. A concept goes through your head and you act on that concept rather than putting it into a linear sequence. So most people think in a mind mapping mode, okay? So we're going to talk about, we talked about EI last class a little bit. Talk a little bit more about emotional intelligence and multiple intelligences and what they are. And we're going to go into different people have different expertise in different areas, learning orientation, and what are some of the cognitive complexities of learning. That's another objective of this chapter. And what do we mean by cognitive complexities? Cognitive complexities are essentially identifying how different people learn and act different ways under different sets of circumstances. And you learn maybe better in one environment than you do in another. A lot of people don't learn sequentially. Some do, but some really learn based on the environment that they're in and how the information is processed given that environment. Again, skill set and culture, putting those things together. And the other thing is, then we look at all of these different concepts about learning and subsequently apply them to the organization. So what I want you to do is I want you to pay attention. Look at your book on page 79, and that's table 3-1, and it talks about the summary of learning. And it goes into, on that particular table, there are 3 rectangles. The first being the approaches to learning, then next being the learning process, and then next being how we have some issues in learning, i.e. intelligence and multiple intelligences. Some people think multidimensionally, but not necessarily sequentially. So what type of learning works best for your particular student of learning in a particular type of learning organization? So we essentially have 3 different approaches to learning, and that first rectangle shows you that you have behavioral, right? You learn by watching others do things. Cognitive, that's how you're processing things. And social, getting different types of intelligences and having them work together. So these are essentially some of the things that you look at. I want you to go through the chapter and section 3 of your book and look through cognitive learning. Look at different types of conditioning. Now, that goes all the way back to the modern age of management. If you remember back to the Hawthorne studies, they talked about how people learn in different environmental settings. Remember, they adjusted the lights, but that wasn't why people produced more. It's because somebody was paying attention to them. So that would come under the social learning process. I want you to look at experiential learning and look particularly, okay, you can see this as I'm holding it up in your book, okay. Look at all of these, this particular section, which is figure 3-1. And 3-1 looks at experiential learning. Everybody has a different learning style, okay? And there are essentially 4. There's creating a learning style. There's planning the learning style. There's deciding. It's almost like a critical path, okay? What learning style is best for you? And then there is the acting learning style. So on the bottom of page, I believe 83, we get into action learning. And I want you to read that, and we explained a little bit about that. Then look on 84, and it talks about multiple intelligences, how people have different types of intelligences. Um, and then once we get through that section, I want you to come into class prepared to, and I'll go over some of this in the theory when we come to class. And like I said, I'll put some videos for you to see, all right, based on the learning objectives of this particular section. Then after that, all right, so go to your reading, listening, and viewing, okay, which you're doing now to get all this information about the theory of what I'm going to cover in the first half of the class. And then into learning activities, we are going to do, okay, I have it written down here. We're going to do action learning. I want you to read that case and be prepared to discuss it in class on page 92 of your book. It goes from 92 to 98, I believe, where the conclusion is. So read that section about action learning. And what I will do is I will come up with, we'll have a little discussion about it, and then I'm going to come up with some questions for you to work on as a team. So there's a lot to talk about. Then I just want you to know that I'm also going to be populating the Apple case. And I'm going to be putting, I want you to read that Apple case, and you can see that that is going to be presented on February 25th of the PowerPoint slides. Again, 2 from each person. Not very busy, so they're talking points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give each team, a question on that Apple case that you have to answer in 2 slides. Now, based on those questions, I need team commitments on those questions of who is talking to what slides. So, for example, if I ask you a question of, all right, how could this situation have been avoided? I'm just using that as a hypothetical, all right? You might say something like, okay, so this team member is going to say this, that's on your template, on your team commitment sheet, and that team member will write 2 slides, okay, on that particular question. All right? So basically, if you have 6 members on the team, in one case I think there's 7, maybe, but I think there's 6 all around, what you would do, very simply, I'm just trying to think of this through my head, is you would do your 2 slides to your talking points based on your contribution. You bring your template contributions for your team, hard copy into class, and you only upload the PowerPoint slides. If you got 6 members on the team, you're uploading 12 slides. That's it for the team. Then you have your team template. You're going to bring that hard copy to class so I can follow through as you're doing your presentations. So that needs to be uploaded by the 18th, and we're going to present on the 25th. So you still have time to critique in between, and chances are I won't change anything, but it's done. Okay. Now the other thing that you do, remember we only meet once a week, so there's a lot to be done. So you need to get together in your teams to do your proposal and who's contributing what to your project based on your concentration for the company that you chose. If you chose marketing as a concentration for that company, you need to break your hypotheses. Again, You're developing your hypotheses. That needs to be done by next Monday. Okay, that hypothesis needs to be completed by next Monday, which will be the 11th. So when you put your hypotheses on your team commitment sheet, when you write your hypotheses from your team commitments, you know all the different sections that need to be uploaded. All right? You do have a due date. If you go through the proposal, that is due on the 22nd. So you got to get going on that. So I'm thinking on Monday, after we do the case study, we talk about your proposals a little bit and firm up that hypothesis. Start breaking it down, get together and talk about it on your individual team contributions. Who's doing what based on that concentration, which comes from that hypothesis. Okay? A lot to do between now and next week. Listen to this video before you come into class. There's a lot to be said here, a lot to be done. All right? So I'm going to post this video in reading, listening, and viewing first with all the other supportive YouTube videos, and then go to learning activities. I want you to be ready to come to class to discuss that case. All right? Then I'm also populating your Apple stuff too for that first presentation. Then you got your proposal. So, class, theory, Apple case study, proposal, talking about the hypothesis. Come into class, we've got a lot to do next week. Whew, I'm done. All right, good luck. See you Monday.